everyone. Welcome back to Let's Chat North Carolina. My name is Shauna, and I am the host of Let's Chat North Carolina. And we have a wonderful guest today by the name of Melissa Enoch. And she is the owner and operator of Trinity Counseling Services located in Burlington and Charlotte, North Carolina. And we want to welcome you, Miss Melissa, to our podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful to have you.
Appreciate you.
Well, Melissa, we are going to be talking about mental health today. And I think with you being my very first guest for 2023, mental health is something that has been on the forefront. It's been on social media, it's been on the news, and I think it's a topic that's welcome to start the new year out right, with so many things happening in the world today. And what better person than to have a licensed professional like yourself talk to myself and our audience about mental health and how it affects the everyday American right here in the United States. My first question for you, Miss Melissa, is where did you receive your credentials?
She just gave a lot of pressure. The first podcast of the year talking about mental health.
Yes, ma'am.
And everyone, and I would like to say my credentials, but I want to let your listeners know that it says by 2025, the U.S. is going to have a shortage of mental health professionals. So if there's anybody that's listening and is considering that as a career, there's going to be 40,000 marriage and family therapists needed. There's going to be 60,000 psychiatrists that are going to be needed, and there's going to be 172,000 mental health counselors going to be needed within the next 2 years.
Amazing.
Because right now, 2020, it says there are more than, I know it's 2023, but this statistic is there are more than 327,500 substance abuse, behavioral disorder, and mental health counselors in the United States. I like to share that before I share my credentials.
Okay.
Because a lot of times people do get confused about who is who as far as in the mental health world, because we say mental health, but who is included underneath the mental health umbrella, if you will. So I hold a Bachelor's of Arts degree, major in psychology from UNC Charlotte. University of North Carolina at Charlotte, because there's more than that. I hold a certificate in human services, so when you think about mental health, then you know, so not every person who has a psychology degree is not a psychologist.
Okay.
So they're considered in the mental health field.
Okay.
I have a human services degree, specialization certificate from Central Piedmont Community College, that's in Charlotte as well. So when you hear mental health, it might translate into human services.
Okay.
So mental health professionals can be in human services as well, or they can have a human services degree and then come inside of the field. There's a degree in the middle. I have a master's of business administration. I got that in between getting certified and having a master's of mental health counseling from Walden University. I got my master's of business administration from the University of Phoenix in Charlotte as well. It just came in the middle. And I always say that because I ended up in out of human services in a business degree. When I first started the business degree, they were like, "Why are you here? You've had all of these years working in human services. What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I don't know why not. I mean, it's a business." And then with the Master's of Mental Health Counseling, it's a specialization in forensic counseling. That was from the university, again, Walden University. And I have 1 semester degree in forensic counseling. It was a doctoral degree in forensic counseling. So mental health, so those are my credentials.
Okay.
And it's broad. You have social workers that fall underneath mental health. You have marriage and family therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health professional, therapists.
Okay.
All of those are there.
Well, wow, you really invested into yourself. So
29 years.
Very impressive. Very impressive. So we know you know your stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, you are overqualified.
More pressure. More pressure.
Exactly. Well, I mean, after that rundown of all your credentials, which is very impressive.
Thank you.
What prompted you to go into mental health? What made you navigate into mental health as a profession?
So if I have to go back, and I don't know how far back we want to go, because I was just having this conversation earlier today. I was born and raised in Alamance County, 70s and 80s, and so you're talking about discrimination and racism. So if I had to stop there for a moment, I can remember being a student in elementary school and not feeling that a teacher, feeling heard or feeling, appreciated or accepted that way. If I go back even further, I was an adopted child. So, sometimes they say when you're an adopted child, you have a longing to want to help others or to belong and to align with others. Of course, after the teacher, when I got to middle school, I actually wanted to be a teacher. So I didn't navigate into mental health. I wanted to be a middle grades teacher because I wanted the students to feel heard, feel appreciated, the things that I wanted and needed. But after my teacher in 5th grade, I stopped caring about education. I always jokingly say I may have been undiagnosed ADHD because I'm from a small town. And when you're from a small town, African American, some of the things that people present, you're not going to get those, just go outside and run that off.
Yeah.
But even then, and when I was in high school, I learned tricks of the trade. I learned how to concentrate. I made very good, and I graduated at the age of 16. So when I got to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, I left a small town. I ended up in a large place, started in the teaching certificate, and then got disenchanted quickly. And then I just basically navigated my schooling until I found abnormal psychology, and that's why I brought this book, because this is the DSM-5.
Okay.
And you can hold it if you want.
All right.
So the DSM-5, I call that the Bible of mental health. Doctors use it, therapists use it, and it was abnormal psychology is what class said, this is what I think that I want to be able to do and do well. I was a non-traditional student, and I was in class, so we were in class 4 hours a week. And each week we would take a chapter out of this book. So this book is about 20 chapters of disorders. So you have anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, substance use disorders. I mean, it's everything. It runs the gamut of what the brain does. So once I took that class, I made an A. It was amazing. Of course, I need to go back. I called my mom every week and told her I thought I had the disorder. And she was like, you don't have any of that. Just, no, that's not what you... I have to, Mom, I think I have anxiety.
Yeah.
And then she was like, no, you don't. And then I call her, Mom, I think I have a depression. No, you don't. Mom, I think... She was really, but I found that this was helpful. It gave information about what the brain does. And right there, I was sold on a major in psychology. I was excited about it. I can hold it from you, but I was excited about that. But then I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody. I just basically took what I needed to do then in order to get a major in psychology. In hindsight, if I had done some internships, it would have directed my path a little firmer. But I just basically take the list. Okay, I need to take this class, this class, this class. This is what's going to help me. I don't recommend anybody to do that.
Yeah.
I recommend people to have people to help them.
Now, let's back it up just a little bit. I know you mentioned that because this is very relevant, labels. You mentioned ADHD, depression. Those are the stigmas that affect the society that we are in today, and even more so now. You can go online. Social media is a big thing, and there's a lot of videos on depression, and there's just a whole lot of stuff that can trigger someone that might be borderline with various issues with mental health. In your personal, from your personal position, why do you think that mental health has increased nationwide and in the United States? And what are the contributing factors for that? What is your personal opinion, coming from your background, coming from a situation where as a child, even back then, you thought that you were ADHD, you thought that you had some type of disorders about yourself. What contributed to that then, and what do you think is, in this era that we're in now, is contributing to the mental breakdown with people?
So back then, you would present behaviors and symptoms of your behaviors, and you didn't have the language to communicate what those things were. Now we have a lot of language that surrounds, but we sometimes, like I was saying earlier today, I was talking to somebody, we might say I have OCD, that's obsessive compulsive disorder, because what you know about that, you count. That in and of itself doesn't necessarily make up the disorder. So this disorder itself presents symptoms. So we have all of the media, we have all of the words, we have the language now. And so people are like, oh, so that explains my behavior. Just like with me, when I was taking that class, and I'll call my mom, because now I'm like, oh, I just learned that this might be what I have. People want to have an understanding about why they do what they do. And so now we have it, right? So now we think, that's why they sound like with TikTok. There's people that have the disorder, have been diagnosed with this disorder. They have the knowledge of this book. And so they say now that's what gives the answer to the questions that they probably have been looking for. And so now that is driving, the numbers and more focus around it, because now it explains what we think we have been.
Right, okay. Do you think that, we know that social media is exposing a lot of the diagnoses, what people think they might have. Do you think it's just, do you think it can be also environmental as well? When people, develop certain characteristics or behaviors, do you think it's also environmental as well? When people have these ways about themselves and different characteristics, do you think mental health can also be an environmental factor as well?
I think
that it's not so much the person themselves, it's the environment that creates the person that we all of a sudden give the label to, like the OCD, the ADHD, the psychosis, and all the other mental health labels that we put on people. Do you think that's a contributing factor as well? And social media is just highlighting what's happening in people's everyday environments?
So let me break your question up. Environment.
Because even like what you said, growing up, because of the environment, created this self-awareness that you have for yourself. So you started labeling yourself, and it probably wasn't what you really thought it was.
Right.
Your environment caused you to have that way about yourself, to have that self-reflection, and it wasn't a positive self-reflection because of your environment. That's why I'm assuming that a lot of times our disorders are based mainly on environment, and it's not really of our own doing.
I want to say yes, but one of the new research that I've been working through is workplace trauma. Okay. So even me saying workplace trauma, immediately like there's a definition that goes to that.
Yeah, even that's an environmental, because
Yeah.
people, and speaking of workplace traumas, look at what's going on in the news. We're not going to use too many words because we are on a platform. But environmental workplace trauma. But I mean, you go into the workplace, you don't expect to have trauma in the workplace.
Right.
But look at what's happening. So it goes back to environment. I'm assuming that you're the professional here.
Yeah.
But I'm just I've lived long enough to kind of experience life, and I've seen some things and I've heard some things. So you kind of just put two and two together sometimes. And so it goes back to that question: is mental health and environmental? So
let me pause a second, because when I was 23 when I started in this field, 23 years old. Green as all get out, and
as most 23-year-olds are.
I was working at a facility,
right,
and overnight, and the doors were unlocked. It was an unlocked facility. I worked at a detoxification facility, right? Doors were unlocked, and I later learned that now those same doors are locked, right? So what happened that they began to lock the doors?
Mm-hmm.
Now I wonder to myself, if I had said I feel uncomfortable with those doors being unlocked at night in the neighborhood that we were in where this facility was located, what would have happened to me as far as me being able to work in the field? I had to accept some of those things. Well, now I have a higher awareness. You say an environment. I have a higher awareness to watch locked doors. To watch unlocked doors.
Mm-hmm.
But I now know that I also technically have post-traumatic stress disorder from being employed there, that now that I watch locked doors. So,
Yeah.
you got people that are in, say like in neighborhoods, like like in neighborhoods where they hear gunfire, they're unbothered by it. Or the one example in New York where the person ended up getting shot and killed in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And people just walked over them because that happens every day.
Right.
That's their environment. Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's their environment. Mm-hmm. They're not, but for me being born and raised in Alamance County, I'm going to go, oh no, what happened? I'm going to respond differently.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about environment and mental health, but by whose definition?
Uh-huh.
That's the concern I have, because there's a model. It's called addressing.
Mm-hmm.
Age, generational. It stands for age. It's it's got stuff. That's why I got my notes.
Mm-hmm.
But
notes are good.
Yeah. That's why I got my notes, because it's so it's age, generational addressing. The addressing model draws attention to 9 cultural factors, and it talks about age, generational influences. It talks about disability, religion, ethnicity, race, social status, sexual orientation, indigenous heritage, national origin, and gender. So we're trained as therapists to cultural diversity. We have to, because the ACA and our Code of Ethics tells us that we have to have this knowledge, because you now see inclusion and diversity and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have classes that you go to teach you how to approach an individual when they're this age or that age or the other age, until you can recognize and appreciate their environment and what they're presenting. But if you're not coming, how are you going to do that if you're not coming from that place?
Exactly.
How are you going to? So the environment is defined by whom? Is it defined by the person, or is it defined by the person trying to help them? That's where.
Exactly.
So when you ask that question, to what degree do I think environmental factors? To go back, I was talking about like the elders, like my mother. Do I believe that they were depressed? I do. But do I believe that they had the language to be able to say that they were depressed? I don't, because they didn't have that language. ADHD, 1986 was the first diagnosis of that. So if somebody is earlier than 1986, behaviorally, they're going to present that as a concern, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened in the 80s and the 90s? Then there were drugs. So then, do you have people that were using stimulants? Because they give stimulants for people that are attention issues, right? So cocaine and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Who's to say that those individuals that were using the cocaine were undiagnosed ADHD, because the diagnosis didn't come about until 1986? Mm-hmm. And then 25 years later, after the diagnosis,
now we have a label for it. Yeah.
The guy himself that created the diagnosis, he denounced it. He said, "Nope, I was wrong. That's not even what it is." What? So now you have young people that have been diagnosed with ADHD, given stimulants, given Ritalin, Adderall, Vyvanse, which is a stimulant, which is in the same category as cocaine, and now you're saying, nope, that's not what it is. That's when you talk about environmental factors and the numbers going up and the mental health. It's like, do you have the label? You don't have the label. Do you have the understanding? You don't have the understanding. Because most of the time, you want to know why your brain ticks like it does.
Now you mentioned the stimulants. Because I know before this podcast interview, we did speak on the phone, and we kind of went over some of the things that we would talk about. And your practice, Trinity Counseling Services, and you have 2 offices. I don't think we mentioned that. You have one in Burlington and one in Charlotte. Your focus is treating your patients more, is it more on a holistic level?
It has grown to more holistic.
More holistic level.
My background, my foundation was drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
But as time progressed, when I would do interviews, like, we do social histories or assessments is what they're called. When the individual would come in and they would do an assessment, I'm listening to them tell me their whole life. So I'm listening to somebody born in the 40s, born in the 50s, born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s now. And then they're telling me, their upbringing, where they, north, south, east, west, out of the country, things such as that. And then they're saying that somewhere around the age of 12, 13, 14, that's middle road, they began to experiment with drugs and alcohol. But they also began to share traumas and things such as that. So they're telling me that they're experimenting with drugs and alcohol, and that was what my foundation was. But where my practice has grown to now is when they come in and I'm identifying that they might have the substance use disorder diagnosis. Let's go back to the scene of the crime, though. And I say the scene of the crime.
Right.
Let's go
like
back
that
to,
analogy there.
let's go back to where the original offense happens. And I wrote down, you had asked me about, why is it increased? Well, I think more attention is being given because of the opioid epidemic. Coupled with that, they're narrowing it. It goes to trauma. Then they go back to the trauma that the brain holds. Give an example. So if a person has had trauma, fibromyalgia is a nervous system condition. The deeper, the worse the fibromyalgia will be the worse the trauma was for them earlier on in life. Is what they have got statistically, right?
Okay.
So that means that your brain, one of the books is called The Body Keeps Score, the Brain Keeps Score, because it says that when the trauma happens, it's housed inside the nerves, and it just travels. Sometimes it gets frozen, and then you begin to do things so that you don't have to deal with it, or you able to push it on and continue with your life. And I think that traumas have happened, but now people are going, oh, I honestly had, because I'll give an example, adverse childhood experiences are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood 0 to 17. Well, we go before we had the DSM-5, and this is 5 now. It used to be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Before we had that, experiencing violence, abuse, and neglect. That's one of the things one of the questions. It's only 10 questionnaire, 10 question. Witnessing violence. Think about school shootings.
Yeah.
And the number of those. Having a family member attempt or die by suicide. Substance use problems. Those are traumas. Mental health problems. Instability due to parental separation and members being in jail or prison. All of those are considered to be traumas. But the ACEs is a newer study too. So now we have things that are explaining what we've seen all along.
Yeah.
Now we got words to it. Now, so does everyone need to seek therapy? Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty much.
I think in America, there's a lot of family dysfunctions. And I'm a true believer that our character is built from 0 to about age 13. By the time you're 13, and this is just some stuff I've kind of read online. And I used to, shout out to Shaw University. I took a couple of psych classes over at Shaw University too, which is a well-known HBCU here in North Carolina. But I think a person's character development starts from ages 0 to 13. And depending on their home environment, really sets the tone for what kind of adult they will be. And speaking from personal experience, and that's in pretty much everyone's household, I always say that your first experience with mental health is in your own family, the nucleus of your family. Your family is your identity. Until you can get out there in the real world and do a comparison to what's so-called normal, even if there is a normalcy these days, right? And I think when you were talking about substance abuse, it's on the rise, even with 13 and 14-year-olds these days. Again, going back to social media, the music that the kids are listening to nowadays is a form of PTSD. The music, glorifies the drugs, it glorifies the alcohol. Not saying that back in the day that it didn't, but we didn't have social media to highlight it,
Right.
where everybody is accessible to it. Because when we were growing up, we didn't have social media.
And it's normalizing it.
And it's right. And so, I mean, if we did have an alcohol problem, it was confined within our walls, and only a certain few people in the family probably knew about it. But now it's out there where everybody else can see it. And the influence of that, I think, is what's creating the issues and the problems that we're having. And let's just stick on the youngsters right now, because I actually heard a quote that said, and guys, if you know who this person is that said the quote, leave us the person's name in our description box here, because I think it's powerful. It says something like, it's easier to raise a child. I'm sorry, excuse me. It's easier to raise a well-adjusted child than to fix a broken adult.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much where we are right now. We have a lot of broken children who have grown up to be broken adults. And this is what's encompassing our society right now.
I agree.
Yeah, I really believe that.
If they believe they're broken.
Well,
the first step is admitting.
Exactly, admitting it.
You gotta admit that that's not normal. That's not right. It's not right behavior. It's not, if all you're seeing is the same thing, then that's insanity.
And it goes back to even cultural. We're both melanated indigenous women here. Within our community, sometimes mental health is never talked about.
No.
We can talk about everything else sometimes, but when it comes down to mental health, because we have, and we're not going to make this culturally specific, but because we do have an identity with one another, and we're speaking from personal experience, and I'm thinking, with this interview and with you being licensed and having the resources available, that more people that look like us will reach out to you and utilize your services. But culturally speaking, it's always been taboo. You don't talk about that. Something's wrong with you.
Right.
And then we grow up as adults, and we do things to suppress our mental health. And that's what happens culturally for us. Not saying that doesn't happen with other people,
right,
but a lot of times resources plays a big factor into how we deal with things. I believe that in our culturally for our culture, there's a lack of resources sometimes, which means lack of resources means you don't get the help that you need right away. And unfortunately, resources allows you to be able, if you have a child that's experiencing, let's just say, a mental health issue that you notice at a young age, or it doesn't manifest, if you have the resources to fix that issue, then 9 times out of 10, that child can flourish into a healthy adult.
Yeah, resources too, but you've got to trust that the individual that comes to you, that you go to, is going to help you.
Exactly.
And you have to, I can't count how many times people will come to me and we're talking and they don't think that there's a method to the madness, right? Mm-hmm. We're just having a conversation. Mm-hmm. But what's really happening is, and I always tell them, I'm like, let your mom be your mom, let your husband or wife be them. Mm-hmm. Let this unbiased person kind of help guide you.
Right.
Because if they have a loyalty to you, familial, they might not hold against the wall something that's not right behavior, or your thoughts aren't the best ones. They're going to that's just how you are, and that, they'll just, sometimes let those things pass. But then they'll say, well, when they come to me, it's like, well, I can get that, I got to pay you to talk to you. Mm-hmm. I can get that home. And that's sometimes that's the attitude individuals have, versus there's an investment in allowing an unbiased individual be a guide. Mm-hmm. With the well, what are you gonna tell me that I don't already know? I'm gonna say, okay, if you already know it, Are you consistently doing it? That's the other thing. Under mental health professional, there are now coaches too.
Yeah.
You know, so that, you know, the list keeps going. Coaches, you know, cheer you along, you know, heighten your strengths, you know, acknowledge your weaknesses. I mean, it's the same thing. So wherever you find the help, whether it be a psychiatrist is someone who gives medicine, right? So if you have an imbalance or something, just like insulin, then the psychiatrist will be the person that you would go to, because they're going to identify that there is actually something that's not in the brain, a chemical that you need, and they're going to give you the medicine for it. A psychologist is going to tell you, let's delve in here and let's make sure we know exactly what symptoms that you're presenting, so that we can have a clear understanding and not just the social media version. Then, you know, so you can go to that person. Then a social worker is going to say, okay, you know, what do you have need of? You know, how are we going to help manage what it is you need? Do you need consistent resources? Do you need, you know, someone to, you know, help you understand utilities? Or, you know, do you not, that's not all they do, but the social worker is more of a case manager. You are my case, let me help manage it. Then a therapist is going to do the therapy. Right, psychotherapy can be psychotherapy, it can be mental therapy, it can be emotional therapy, it can be sexual therapy, it can be whatever it needs to, because now we know what the symptoms are. Are we going to eliminate them? If we can, because some things can't be eliminated, right? Or are we going to help you live with it? You know, are we going to help you if you have depressive symptoms? A therapist can help you say, okay, we know what these are, let's help you run out in front of them. And then a coach, as you're running out in front of those symptoms, the coach can go. Right. You can do it. You know, so all of us can work together if we would work together in helping this one individual with whatever it is that's going on. And if it's brokenness from childhood, let's go back to the scene of the crime and clean it up. Let's get the evidence.
Exactly.
Let's get rid of it. You know, let's process it. If it's something from adolescence, let's do that. You know, is it you know, the experience, your first experience with racism? You know, is that a real statement? You know, is it a workplace type of an issue? Let's deal with that. You know, this goes on, and then you don't need the person all the time. Okay. You know, with therapy, you know, you can have one counseling session. Oh, I don't have to see you anymore because now you just needed to hear that, you know. Or we might need to be, if it's more severe, we might need a lot of time. Okay. That's where the pan to the book. That's where the 99 problems comes from, right?
Yeah, you got your board over there too.
I got 99 problems of being saved isn't one. The book, and I'm not highlighting the book, but the book.
Well, you highlight your book. That's what you're supposed to do.
So I have in the 99 problems book.
I've got 99 problems, but being saved isn't one of them.
It's on Amazon.
Amazon, everyone.
What I have done is I have taken the same DSM-5, you know, as a licensed person, because I'm trying to help other therapists. I feel like I do assessments well because I listen to people. I've got a pretty good understanding, and I've got a pretty good background in psychology. And then I help them to do their own assessment, so that time doesn't have to be spent. That first session first, second, third session. Like sometimes, like with employee assistance, you only get 6. You don't have to spend those first 3 sessions doing the assessment. You can tell the assessment person, I now know these are my presenting problems because I put it in here. I helped them. I just did the assessment for them in here. You know, I now know that I need to question in my childhood the brokenness, because you know that being bitter. I now know that I have a pattern of behavior. I now know that generationally, this is what's going on with me. So in the first probably 50 pages, it's not a long book, I help them to do their own assessment so they can figure out where that brokenness happens, where those patterns happen.
You help them take initiative with accountability as well.
Almost like a journal.
To help solve their problems, which is allowing them to partake in their own healing.
Yes. And then they can bring it to a therapist.
Yeah. And
they can say, you know what, this is what I know about myself. Because the therapist has presented what I know about myself. Can you help me in this area? And then they can run on.
Now, what's your demographic? When people come to you, is it more, do you do more men? Do you do more women, children? Is it?
I personally don't work with kids only because I have two adolescents right now.
Okay.
And I think I would bleed into them. I was like, stop it.
Okay, gotcha.
I feel like personally I would
Okay.
like, stop doing that.
Okay.
But I've been working with more adults. In my history, when I worked at a detoxification facility, it was two units for men and it was 1 unit for women.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked in corrections, same thing. It was 2 units for men, 1 unit for women. For some reason, men seem to come in more than the women.
Oh.
For me, for years, it was majority males. But in the last, maybe a little bit before pandemic into now, it's been more females. Not sure the rhyme or reason. I feel like it's because, and I always tell them, you've been strong too long. The strong ones have been strong too long.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that really just cracked open that strength.
Yeah, you mentioned after the pandemic situation, do you notice that your business has increased?
Oh, yeah.
Are more people gravitating towards getting
Yes.
mental health assessments and counseling to
Yes.
help them deal with their day-to-day life?
Yes. Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, my stars. So originally pre-pandemic, I was primarily fully court mandated. Pandemic, I became more not even mandated at that point. It was more employee assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Because people, if you have a full-time job, if you have insurance, right, more than likely you have a benefit of employee assistance. And what that is, it's a short-term, few is 1, maybe 3, up to 6. I've seen 12 sessions where they will connect you with a therapist, and that individual will help you process what's been difficult for you.
And this is through their employers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For their
Employee assistance.
Employee
Okay.
assistance program. Usually, it doesn't matter whether it's Cigna, Magellan, but also in pandemic, I've connected with an organization where it was disruptive events, because there is stuff that goes on in jobs, workplace shootings, harm that comes to them. And so, and I tell them, I'm like, if I am here, I always tell my friends, if I go out, something bad has happened, right? So when I get there, the insurance has brought me to the facility for them. And I'm like, if I'm here, that means you got some really good insurance because they brought the therapist to you.
Right.
And usually when I go in, it's never been about whatever the incident was. It's about what it is that they need. Grieving, divorce. Because when somebody, most of it's past people passing on. And it's something about when someone passes on, then it kind of makes you reminisce on whatever's going on.
It's a void.
Something happened,
Right.
like you didn't deal with your own.
Yeah.
The trauma of the young man at the football, right? We all witnessed. Well, I didn't watch the football game, but I really believe that triggered some people, because now you're hearing people say, well, cardiac arrest happened here, cardiac arrest happened there. Because anytime that there is a major incident that happens, technically that creates a trauma. That was a whole stadium of people that witnessed something. The helpers was like, I want to get down there and help, but I can't. The ones that have never seen that before, now they're going, the ones that play the sports, now they're going, all of that. The team needs help. The ones that provided the help need help. EMS needs help. And then imagine being an EMS worker and then seeing that EMS worker, this is what I would have, you know what I mean? So this just keeps happening. I'm sorry, I get real passionate about
you're going back
needs.
to what happened on the football field. Like I said, I heard about that story. I don't watch too much football,
Yeah. No, I
but
don't either,
I heard about it and I saw little clips of it online. And it just goes back to what we're saying. Couple years ago, prior to the internet, it would just been isolated to that football game. But now you have millions of people from around the world who may have been triggered by that as well. So can you imagine the trauma which creates this big ball of negative energy?
Yeah.
And it's affecting everybody on such a grand scale because now everybody's privy to what's going on.
I hate 9/11.
Yeah.
Like that date. I only hate it because I don't hate what happened. I hate because they keep reminding us.
Yeah.
and then you triggered again. You know, you go in because you see the conversations. Where were you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
20 how many years ago? What? You know.
That's a good point right there.
Because it keeps, and so we thinking that we're giving it. That goes back to the definitions. We think we're giving information, we define and we communicate. You know, we're giving all this stuff. But is it doing harm or is it good?
And I guess it can kind of still open back up those old wounds, especially if you're a person that has not learned coping mechanisms or healing mechanisms to keep yourself together. So, I mean, the people who have learned how to do that, they're probably a little bit more well adjusted. But the people who haven't, it just conjures up those old memories again. But you're absolutely right.
Someone who's had therapy and someone who hasn't.
And what about the people who actually lived it?
Right.
I mean, that's just something that you just probably would never, ever be able to overcome in your life. And you're constantly reminded about that. So, I mean, triggering is very real.
And when you're triggered, do you have the wherewithal to reach out to someone? Going back to me being in, you know, my background being in alcohol and drugs, some people only know to cope with things by using substances. And I'm not berating anyone for, you know, drinking or whatever it is that they do. I'm just aware of the snowball effect that happens, and what that does is it in and of itself still freezes the brain and keeps you in that, you know, you'll always fall to that. And then that's not helping you work.
It keeps you stuck.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it keeps you
don't
stuck.
work through it. But that's all you know in order to be able to cope with it. So
now, a person with severe mental health issues or substance abuse, do you think someone like that can truly ever recover fully, 100%, without the aid of someone like yourself, a counselor or a psychotherapist or a psychologist, or without drugs or some type of assistance? Is the brain wired to fully recover from PTSD, from habitual drug abuse, from negative environmental factors growing up as a child? Are we able to truly overcome them, or are we constantly as adults, are we just preoccupying ourselves with work, with children, to suppress our feelings and our emotions because of a past history? Are we able to ever fully recover?
So I'll keep my foundation to DSM-5. Are there diagnoses that can recover? There are going to be some individuals that are going to live with what they have. And they can learn to live with it. Then there'll be some individuals who don't have to experience it ever again. It all depends on the severity of it. So if you're saying severe mental illness, the recovery part is, are they able to live life on life's terms without assistance? There will be some disorders, no.
And what would those disorders be? The ones where people...
I mean, somebody is diagnosed with schizophrenia forever. That's usually 18 to 25. Will they always have schizophrenia? Yes. Will they always need medication? Yes. Will they always need someone to help them? Yes. But now if you have someone who, say, let's just go with experimented with alcohol, got sick, right? Threw up, we had a blackout. Do they ever have to, can they recover from that? Yes, right? Because they'll never have to drink to that extent again.
Right.
So that would be differences of who can and who can't. Are there, you know, they say once the dopamine goes out and the serotonin goes out, those are your neurotransmitters, you don't get them back. So will you need medicine to get them, or will you be able to learn how to get it externally? There's some people that'll be able to have, say, the depressive symptoms and have the depression but not need medicine.
Now, are those the kind of people that, in your professional clinical experience, are those people that can adapt to our modern society, our everyday way of life, or are those the type of individuals do you think should be in more of a institutional situation for the rest of their lives, just to make sure that they're well kept and that they don't do harm to anyone else and themselves.
I mean, they have independent living.
Okay, they do.
You know, but
Okay.
they're with independent living, that is, you know, people have, say, mental retardation. I don't think they use that as a term now, but let's just say, well, they have places where they teach them living skills and work skills and, you know, routines, and they live, you know, in housing, and then they have someone to oversee them, and they can live their life like that. So, but that, you know, that's having the diagnosis, getting the help, and then understanding that you're gonna need this assistance for the rest of your life.
Okay.
And most of the disorders, I mean, like with drugs and alcohol, are there going to be people that are going to always need somebody to help them? To some point, to some extent, severe levels, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there's one word that's all across the internet, and I've used it, you've probably used it, and it's the word narcissism. And I know that that is a word that some people use it out of context because it's like the buzzword. What is narcissism? And like I said, I may have used it, and I hope I use it in the correct context. But what is that?
Go to my sheet.
Yeah.
I
have an ideal of what it is, but because you're the professional, I need it to come from you so that our viewers can understand what exactly that is, because it's just something that people are using that term a lot. And I don't know if it's just the buzzword and if people are using it correctly, or is it really an epidemic? It's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
What is it?
By definition, narcissism, I love my book here, is an excessive interest in or admiration of oneself or one's physical appearance. Like that. That's by definition. But now, narcissistic personality disorder, which is that is one of the personality disorders out of the 20 that I named earlier. Says a personality disorder is characterized. So when we say narcissism, is that someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, right? Or are they just excessively interested in themselves? It comes from, the root of it comes from Narcissus, which was the Greek god, and he kept looking at himself in the water, and he was admiring himself. And there's a whole story about it. I think he was admiring himself, and then I think that one of the flowers was like looking at him and admiring himself, and then something else happened to him, and it didn't end well. So that's where the flower of the Narcissus comes from.
Okay. I've heard that story.
Yep. So, but narcissistic personality disorder is characterized by symptoms which include, and this is out of this book, grandiosity, a disregard for others' feelings, and excessive need for admiration. And it says these are those conditions that are characterized by persistent behavior that interferes with developing normal relationships and functioning in society. And sociopathy is included, which is a mental disorder causing. So sociopathy is the title of it, is a mental disorder causing dysfunction in thinking and perceiving and relating to others, including narcissism, antisocial behavior, and lack of empathy. As a therapist, I'm gonna sweep it with, as a mental health professional, you will find us hard pressed to diagnose someone with a personality disorder. Hard pressed. Because once this is diagnosed, because most time, well, not most time, when you get a diagnosis, that's it, right? And those don't recover. So when you say someone is a narcissist, you're saying that's who they are.
It's a personality trait,
and that's right.
And I think
they can't be fixed.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too, social media plays into that role as well, because you can actually become someone else. That narcissistic trait is heightened because now you can sit behind a computer module or a computer screen and manifest that even more so. So I think
and especially be wary with
you have to be you have to
titles.
Be pretty much aware of that. And I just believe, as far as children, I think that in the world that we're in now, so that they have a more of a healthy mental awareness, and that they don't develop those certain characteristics. Would you suggest that parents monitor their children's time online and what they're looking at, and so that they can have healthy habits?
Manager the parents' time online.
Yeah, okay, I know you're right. Some of us need to be, tapped a little bit, but you're right.
You asked that a question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, with everything that's going on, we want distractions because reality is the worst right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
really.
Kids, adults, people. A lot of people want to. That's why I think the advent of AI at this point, like the AI, the artificial.
Yeah.
Because the reality is like, it's just. I'm sorry, I talk on run on sentences, but I start thinking. So I love the movie The Road to Perdition. That was Tom Hanks, and the young boy asked the gangster guy, the mob guy, why was he always smiling? And I'll clean it up, but he was like, it's just so freaking hilarious. Like everything they were seeing going on around him, it didn't make sense, but he just smiles about it. And I think that we, through the pandemic, we were laughing at everything. And some of it was not funny, but that's a defense mechanism. Humor is 100 of them, but a defense mechanism of humor. We laughed through it, even though it wasn't funny, just to get through the collective trauma that we were all experiencing, because our life as we knew it changed.
Forever.
And we weren't prepared for the change.
Yeah.
Unless you read 1918, 1919, which was one of the original pandemics, right? That number, so many people died during the Spanish flu. So it was ramifications even in the area in Alamance County. They said it was, because then there was a war. The parents had given like their kids, people were losing their children to it. So now you got these losses. So then there was grief. They said even during that pandemic, there were the higher incidence of individuals from that to now who have health problems, right? So then that's probably where the advent of the doctors came from. So what is going to be the ramifications of what we've experienced in the next 30, 35 years? That's probably why it says that the number of what we're going to need is going to increase. Right now, people don't even want to be married. They don't want to have kids. They don't, they're losing their homes. I mean, there's a lot of adjustments. That was what it was in the very beginning of COVID. It was called, that's another disorder, an adjustment disorder. An adjustment disorder only lasts no more than 90 days.
Yeah.
Because if it lasts longer than 90 days, like with anxiety, 6 months, depression, 2 weeks. So if it's lasting anywhere between 2 weeks and 6 months, it's no longer, you're not adjusting.
Yeah. You
now have this, the late onset of like juvenile diabetes versus adult diabetes. There are some people that were able to hold on, but now think about when you go into a facility and you hear somebody cough.
Now you're wondering, is it that?
Is it COVID?
Right, yeah. Well, it's going to be very Omicron, interesting to find out in the next couple of years how we cope in this society. But Melissa, you have been a wealth of knowledge, and I'm hoping that our viewers who've tuned in today have gotten something from this, because I know you
signing off. You right now. Can I say, you asked me a question? When should you seek counseling?
Yeah. When should a person seek counseling?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No. I just wanted.
I want you to go ahead. Yeah.
When it begins to create a dysfunction in your life. And it says, how do you do that? You assess that something is not right. So you've assessed your own problem. That's my reference to the book.
Okay.
You know what it is, because this is what a counselor will help you do, because it's creating a dysfunction in your life.
Okay.
Whether it be sleep, whether it be eating habits, whether you're not doing the same things you consistently have done, like exercise. If it's creating a dysfunction, and define what that dysfunction is, you're not your normal self, then you need to seek help.
Now,
you want to seek help from
people who need help. How can they reach you? What's your telephone number and what is your website?
TrinityCounselingCharlotte.com, and then the phone number's on there. There's a contact page on there. My phone number 336-270-4053 in the area of Charlotte. 704-323-2446. But Melissa, Trinity Counseling at gmail.com.
And we're going to have all your information too on the bottom of our
But if they go to
description
TrinityCounseling.com, it gives information, gives the services, and with the advent of the internet, you can be statewide.
Exactly. And you guys, these are her books. I've got 99 Problems, but Being Saved isn't one of them. And then you also have another one here too.
The Strength
of Her Words, and these can be featured on Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
And before we close out, we also want to thank our sponsors, Linda Hendrickson. She is our first out-of-state sponsor, and she's located in Colorado. And the name of her business is called Lincoln Park Spa, located in Colorado. Her information will be right below in our description box. Our second sponsor is Terrell Services. She specializes in home care services for residents in the city of Raleigh and in Cary, located right here in North Carolina. And her name is Ginger Terrell. Again, we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you would like to appear on Let's Chat North Carolina and you live in the state of North Carolina, reach out to us at letschatnorthcarolina@gmail.com. If you're an out-of-town sponsor, we would love to also mention your business on our podcast, because we're on social media and we don't know who our audience is or where they're tuning in from. They could be tuning in from another country, different various cities and states, and you never know, they may be interested in your business as well. So email us if you'd like to become an out-of-town sponsor, or if you're in North Carolina and would like to be a sponsor. Again, the email is letschatnorthcarolina@gmail.com. I wish everyone well, and you take care.